What is up, my dashing dudes? I am the Hans TV, and today we find out what happens whenever you fire somebody for absolutely no reason. It's r/ProRevenge. Our first post for the day comes from Peculiar Liar. Get me fired? Say goodbye to your bonus and promotion. This happened a good long while ago. I was in high school and got a job at one of the big box stores in the computer department. This store chain had an in-house technician department, which was always where I wanted to go. After busting my butt in sales for 2 years, putting up with rude customers, silly rules, and all the other glorious trappings of a retail job, I finally got the chance to be promoted to the technician department. It was not as glamorous as I thought it would be. I quickly found out that most of the repairs consisted of running the prepackaged antivirus suite, updating Windows, and doing data backups prior to wiping computers clean and reinstalling them. I always liked tinkering with hardware more, but since 80% of the customers had laptops, and those repairs were deemed too complicated by corporate, we would just send the laptops out to get repaired by third-party vendors. It was still better than sales by a long shot, and we had a great team working in the technician area, except for one dude. Let's call him Mike. He always behaved like his crap smelled like roses. He was technically a lead technician, and even though that just meant he had a little more authority, he had access to a corporate account to arrange shipments of computers to and from our store. He was acting like he was the manager of the department. Nevertheless, our actual manager was a splendid dude that took care of us, and as such, Mike's douchery did not bother any of us that much. Fast forward a little, and our awesome manager found a much better job. This opened up a spot for manager, and since the whole store supervision was going through a shakeup, the general manager was fired for embezzlement, and all the people he hired, 90% of managers, were under review. This led to everyone trying their hardest not to mess up, and the new GM decided that since our department was one of the best in the district, he would not try to hire an outsider, but will promote from within. Now, Mike was working at this store for almost 10 years at that point, and a couple of people that started working with him as sales associates were by this point managers and assistant managers. One of them, Brittany, was an assistant manager in charge of customer services and checkout. One of the conditions for Mike's official promotion to manager was to keep the #1 spot in the district performance-wise. One of the key metrics was the rejection rate from our third-party vendor. If we mistakenly sent them a software problem to fix, they would charge us extra. Mike started obsessing about the numbers, especially when it came to the rejection rate. He insisted that we would spend extra time to confirm issues, even when there were recalls from manufacturers for these items. I hated this bureaucracy, since it meant that people needed to wait almost the maximum allowed time to get their computers back. So a few times I skipped the extra diagnostics when I knew for sure the problem was hardware. One day Mike decided to do an audit on all outgoing machines, and found out that I've sent 4 units skipping his extra checks. He told me that he will write me up for it, but when he tried, the general manager told him that he is not a manager yet, and I have shown to the GM that I have followed the corporate procedure in diagnosing these units. I thought that was the end of this, but I was sorely mistaken. Mike hated that I showed the GM that Mike's procedure was inefficient, and that he was denied power over me. About a month later, I got a call from Mike asking if I could come to the store on my day off because there was an issue with a customer. When I came in, I was greeted by Mike with a poop-eating grin, and he told me to wait in the back and not to work on any computers. After about an hour, Mike and Brittany came in and asked me to head to the front office. They started an official write-up process and claimed that I had made a mistake when creating a backup of a customer's data and have placed a DVD with no data on it into the box that was returned to the customer, and then wiped his PC clean. I knew it was BS, since I always copy the data to an external hard drive, ran antivirus to make sure that nothing bad got copied, and then burned the DVDs. Yet when I asked to check the external hard drive, Mike said that due to my negligence, I was not allowed back in the tech area. He went to check the hard drive and said there was nothing on it. At that point, I knew he was BSing. But him and Brittany were hell-bent on completing this write-up. I have asked for senior management to be present and was shot down again. Turns out the general manager was on vacation. They completed the write-up and told me that due to the egregious error that cost the company tens of thousands of dollars, I was not allowed to work in the tech room, and I would be relegated back to the sales floor. I told them to shove it and submitted my resignation on the spot. I later found out that a week later, They gave the customer the data that was on the hard drive all this time. Mike simply erased the DVDs. I grabbed a DVD-ROM by mistake for that backup, and waited for the customer to come back and complain. I've also called the corporate HR line and told them what happened. They said that since I quit with a letter of resignation, they would not launch an investigation, but they've received and recorded my complaint. Through luck and the fact that I was a good hardware tech, I landed a job at a shop that did hardware repairs a week later and started in another week. Turns out this depot was the service center that covered the entire district, and they had the master contract with the big box chain where I worked. Since I have worked as a tech in that store, I was more than familiar with their labeling and ticketing system. For tracking purposes, the label included the store and technician number. After a couple of weeks, I gathered some goodwill at my new job and started trading the units with my colleagues to work on as many units from my old store as possible. Over the next 3 months, I made sure that every single unit sent in by Mike would come back with an extra charge. Also, it turned out that Mike, since he was in charge of shipping, would sometimes steal other technicians' tickets to boost his personal performance numbers to secure that manager promotion. Well, that bit him in the butt hard. There was one week in particular when he sent in over 15 units out of 20 to get fixed, and 15 units came back with extra software charge. I've also kept detailed records that proved that the Mike did not follow his own policy of extra checks. When the performance figures came out for that quarter, the store crashed into 5th place from number 1. Mike missed out on his promotion and a big bonus that was promised to him. A good buddy of mine from the store got the manager position a few months after that, and I have explained to him how to reduce the number of software charges to almost 0, so he looked like a superstar. Mike was first relocated to lead technician, then he was either let go or he quit. I'm not sure. Last I heard, he started his own mobile technician business that folded after a year. What I didn't know is that this whole incident with Mike effing up led to the GM to review everything Mike did, including my write-up and dismissal. As it turns out, they did not even register the write-up since I quit on the spot and buried it. The only way my general manager was able to find it is because of the HR complaint that was filed against both Mike and Brittany. General manager was not pleased that they went behind his back to get rid of someone and fired Brittany. He was a very decent man who called me later that day and apologized and even offered me my old job back. I thanked him, but I was making more money at the new place and did not have to deal with customers, so I passed on that. Well, OP, good on you. I mean, you're in a better job, in a better life, and you don't have to deal with retail customers, which honestly are the absolute worst people on the planet. So good on you, and it's good that your GM got back to you and tried to give you your job back. That's very respectable. Our next post comes from Underwhelming Twin. Scam me for $80 for cleaning on move out? I don't think so, Jack. Background. About 10 years ago, my landlord died, or at least the person who owned the place we were renting. The property managers have been delightful, but whoever inherited wanted to sell, so the house was for sale. Enter a butthole. We'll call him Jack, who decides to buy the place. Now, ours was the top floor, i.e. attic converted into a suite of a house, less than 35 square meters, 375 square feet. The bathroom was literally where the stairs up to the top floor used to be. The place was tiny. Jack came to check out the place, as you should before buying a place. He had one of those Bluetooth earpieces in, and I can't even remember if he acknowledged us. He spent about 30 to 45 seconds in our suite. Next time we hear from him is about a month later. Apparently, he'd bought the place. He stops by to give us a notice of rent increase, effective in 6 months, legal minimum, from $485 to $795. The place is not worth that much. We say nuts to that and decide to buy a house, since what the hell, it's not much more per month. Surprise to anyone who's never bought a house? It was more than just mortgage payments. We give him all the required notice to move out. We move and clean the place up really well. Mind you, when my partner moved in, it was not especially clean. And we happen to have the move-in inspection, which mentions this. Jack decides to try to scam us for $80 of our damage deposit for cleaning. He doesn't provide the required forms, just says, "I'm going to hold $80 from your damage deposit for cleaning." We respond with, no you're not. Jack, assuming we needed the cash for our next damage deposit or bills, and will settle for anything. "Take this or I'm going to keep your whole deposit." Cue the revenge. So he decides to just keep the whole deposit, $485 of it. I file the paperwork with the rentalsmen, who unsurprisingly, after their investigation, rule in my favor. He's ordered to refund the whole deposit, but Jack decides not to pay, and the rentalsman doesn't have any enforcement powers. So I have to go to the local sheriff's office. They can send a legal demand letter for the deposit plus costs, but it will cost me $100 to $150. I forget up front. Sure, go ahead. Jack decides to ignore the sheriff's kindly letter. Sheriffs say that they can start proceedings to recover the debt plus costs, but I again have to pay up front, about $250, and it might take quite a while. I guess most people would quit at this point. Being out of pocket about $700 and throwing more money at the problem and then maybe having to wait months didn't appeal to them, and there's also a chance you never collect. I chose to pay the sheriffs. They sent another, less friendly letter to Jack. But here's the best part. Now that they're recovering a debt, they're going to recover on all of the outstanding judgments against him. And apparently, he's tried this before. They send him another couple of letters. Pay up or else. Jack chose else. So they seized the title to Jack's giant white SUV. I can't remember what it was, but not a cheap one. They didn't physically take it away or anything, but they gave him 30 days to pay all the judgments against him, or they would take it and sell it at auction. Somehow he all of a sudden found the money. My share, $485 plus $150 and plus $250. It was $885. The other people who'd registered judgments, but not paid to start the collection process, were about $5,000 more. I can't remember how long the whole process took, but it was at least 6 months. As I said in the last r/ProRevenge stories, that is one juicy beverage. Man, you really upsold this. From $485 to $885, that's almost twice what you originally paid. Damn, that's a lot. Good on you, OP. Our final post for the day comes from Ilaria. My uncle took revenge on behalf of my parents. As the title gives away, this didn't happen to me, but this is the story of how my uncle avenged my parents. My parents had me when they were plenty young. They were not teens anymore, but had barely left that age bracket. My mom and dad met in college. That was also when they had me. So when my parents were in their courses, I mostly stayed with my grandparents. The whole family lives in the same area, and the college was not that far away. My parents are still young and like to go out with friends on occasion. When the following happened, I was a few years old. On occasion, they frequented a bar. A drunk guy there groped my mom and did not take a no as a no. My dad intervened and stopped the guy. About half an hour later, all seemed forgotten. The music was loud, the bar crowded, and then someone in the crowd hit my dad with an empty glass pitcher square in the face. He was bleeding profusely and collapsed. But in the press, semi-darkness, and over the music, no one knew who did it. My dad got taken to the hospital. He had a broken nose and a heavy concussion. He also couldn't see who had attacked him, and his memory between the alcohol and being hit in the head was also very fuzzy. Of course, they considered the guy who had harassed my mom, but they didn't know him, nor did they see him anywhere leading up to the moment, let alone have any evidence. So they pressed charges against unknown, but there was virtually nothing anyone could do. But then, a few days later, that piece of crap that had harassed my mom approached her on campus. Turns out he was in the same college as my parents. He made a few veiled comments and left little doubt that it had been him that hit my dad in the face. And then the piece of garbage let my mom know that my dad next time should mind his manners, and that the little touching he had done didn't hurt anyone, and wasn't that bad. And if he wanted to do it again, he would, and maybe more. And then the piece of crap went on his merry way. My mom was horrified, of course, so she went home and told my grandparents, my dad, and his parents. But no one could do anything. It was a he said, she said deal after all. And my mom hadn't even gotten the guy's name. My mom cried a lot at that time and didn't know what to do. She was also afraid of going to classes or out alone. I honestly only remember that time very scarcely. I was just a little kid. But I can remember my dad in the hospital with his broken nose, and my mom crying a lot. My dad, of course, was just as angry and humiliated as my mom. No one knew what to do, and everyone was treading on eggshells around each other. But that is where my uncle enters the stage. My uncle, my mom's brother, lived on the other side of the country. He was a PI, and he was, of course, the last to hear the full story. But the moment he heard someone had threatened his little sister, he was on his way home. After hearing the full story, my uncle knew it would likely be hard to get the guy on harassment, the assault, or the threats, having no evidence. My uncle had my mom put the guy out from afar on campus. It took a few days to find him, but then my uncle started to stalk that piece of human filth. My uncle took sick days, all his vacation, and invested every second possible to find out everything about the harasser. My uncle even approached the pig in another bar and became drinking buddies with him. Over several weeks, my uncle had uncovered all manners of illicit behavior: possession, consumption, and distribution of drugs, theft, and a few other misdemeanors and small-time stuff. And my uncle could have put him away for that. But my uncle always said when asked about that if he sent the butthole to prison, it would be for molesting my mother and hurting my dad. And that is what he did. One night, while out with his new buddy drinking, my uncle made the idiot piss drunk and they landed in my uncle's motel room. He got the harasser to incriminate himself on video, rattling off a list of illegal stuff he was up to. My uncle had, of course, pretended to be a crook too. Among the stories Butthole told was a story of how he groped some chick and brained her dude with a pitcher of beer. Now, something needs to be said. In my country, of course, recording someone in secret is illegal and under some conditions, like if the police do it, it is not permissible piece of evidence in court. But, as a PI, my uncle knew that laws for that exactly. But paradoxically, this situation is different, if it is not only audio, but also video. And my uncle had the butthole on camera confessing. The next day, my uncle turned himself into the police with all of his collected evidence, because secretly filming people was still a crime, though the video could be used as court evidence, as my uncle was not affiliated with the police or any other government agency. When the criminal trial and civil trial were over, the butthole got 6 years in prison and had to pay damages to my mother and father, and my uncle got slapped with the equivalent of a $2,000 fine for secretly filming the butthole. Money well spent, he always said. Now that is a juicy beverage. Come on, man. Your uncle used his skills as a PI to incriminate some guy that was likely going to get away with it if he didn't? That is amazing. Well, alright my dashing dudes. That is going to do it for today's episode of r/ProRevenge. I hope you liked the stories, and if you did, I'll link them down in the description as always. And if you liked the video, feel free to drop a sub, a like, and a comment down below what you'd like to see me read next. A humongous thank you to everyone who has subscribed in the past few months. Last I checked, we're at 221 subs, which is amazing to me. I never thought that we'd ever get anywhere near this big, and I can't thank y'all enough. But with that being said, I will see you in the next video.